Dave Softy Mahler, longtime voice on KJR Radio in Seattle, the flagship for the Washington Huskies.
Let's go!
Oh,
let's go! Come on now, let's go! How can I follow Brock Heward, man? Are you kidding me? Brock Heward, Damon Heward, their dad Mike Heward, famous high school football coach here in the area, Puyallup, Washington, state champion. Coach guys like Billy Joe Hobart. His brother Luke is in college football as an assistant right now. I was in a good mood, and now you're making me follow that guy. I thought what happened?
Softy, we can't get you down to New Orleans fast enough, my man.
Tomorrow. I'll be there tomorrow, land at 3:30 Central Time. Tell me what bar to meet you at and which credit card you're paying with, and I'll be there.
You got it. You got it. All right, so you're the guy who's in touch with the people. What does this mean to Washington Husky fans? And, Kalen DeBoer, the guy has not made a sideways step since taking over the program. I mean, size up what we're watching here with what DeBoer's done.
It's just an insane turnaround, guys. I mean, nobody would have seen this coming. Like, not even Kalen DeBoer, I think, would have seen this coming. Not even Kalen DeBoer's parents or his wife or his kids. Anybody who's totally biased, nobody would have seen this coming. I mean, just go back to where they were 2 years ago. They're coming off the 4-8 season. They lost the Apple Cup to Wazoo. Brock's nephew, Sam, was a pure freshman starting in that game, and Bob Gregory, the interim head coach after Jimmy Lake got fired, decided it was a good idea to let the 5-star 18-year-old have his first ever start in a freaking rivalry game that UW needed to save their ass and avoid a 4-8 year. And they played terribly, and they got smoked. And that's the day that Jaden DeLora, who's now leaving Arizona, by the way, on his third school in 4 years, that's the game where Jaden DeLora took the Wazoo flag, the Cougar flag, and planted it right on the 50-yard line at Husky Stadium. So just think about the atmosphere, guys, right? I mean, the worst times, the darkest times for Texas football, when you guys are pissed off, you're angry, you're frustrated, there's animosity all over the program. The fan base is eating their own, turning on each other. Media's going after the AD and the president, the head coach and the players. Everybody's transferring. That's what it was like 2 years ago. And now here we are, and they've won 20 in a row, and they have a shot to, I think, win a national title. I mean, guys, I think all four of these teams have a shot to win the national championship. In 2016, I think a lot of us were kind of happy to be there, and their offense played like that against Alabama. Their defense was fine, but their offense played like crap against Alabama that day with Jake Browning and Myles Gaskin and company. This is a different deal, man. They've beaten a top 6 team twice in the Oregon Ducks. They've run through this unbelievable gauntlet. When the season schedule came out, everybody looked at November with USC, Oregon State, Utah, Oregon, the Apple Cup. Nobody thought they would go undefeated. And here they are, undefeated. It's been a freaking amazing turnaround for these guys.
Yeah, Softy, you got to give Kalen DeBoer a lot of credit. But, Michael Penix, he was in New York for a reason. He's what makes this offense go. Talk about his leadership. Obviously, we know his play. I think he's going to have a big chance to be a solid NFL player on the next level. But talk about him as a person and the confidence that he brings as a 6-year senior, a guy that's overcame adversity with tearing his ACL, and now he's having all this success.
I think if you're not a Texas fan, you're rooting for Michael Penix, honestly. It's that kind of story. I mean, this guy was hurt every single year at Indiana, had 4 injuries, and just could not get a friggin' break, guys, when he was a Hoosier. And now he transfers to play for Kalen DeBoer. He's finishing second in the Heisman Trophy race. He's second-team All-Pac-12 behind Bo Nix. He's the Maxwell winner. I mean, you talk about his character, Zay. Think about the showing at the Heisman Trophy when he opened up his jacket and had all the names of his teammates and coaches in there. Jaden Daniels, meantime, has a picture of him doing the Heisman pose, and somebody asked Bo Nix at the ceremony if he had done the same thing that Michael did. He said no. So he kind of made a couple guys look silly, to be honest with you. But that's how he is. The guy cuts a deal with Beats by Dre and gives the entire team headphones, right? Everything he's done, all of his success, he's always pointed back to his teammates for making it happen. And you're exactly right that Michael Penix in the passing game is the engine that makes this football team go. There's no question about that. But none of this happens without the offensive line. None of it. And that to me, Chip and Jay, is even a crazier story than the overall team from 2 years ago, because going into 2021, Phil Steele, I think it was Phil Steele, had a preseason publication that I'm sure you guys read every year. And he had the Washington offensive line as one of the top units in college football. And they stunk. They were terrible. They couldn't do a damn thing. And that's the one position coach that Kalen DeBoer retained, was Scott Huff, whose group just won the Joe Moore Award for the best offensive line in college football. Look, there's no doubt that Michael Penix can handle pressure. Go back and look at the Michigan State game. Look at the USC game for examples of that. But the way this offensive line has protected Mike and the way they've given him time to throw, guys, I'm telling you right now, if the Longhorns cannot get pressure on Michael Penix in this game on Monday, they are done. They cannot win the game without getting pressure on Michael Penix, because you've got 3, 4, sometimes 5 wide receivers that if you give number 9 time to throw and you give those guys time to get into their routes, you're cooked. You know, I feel comfortable saying that. It's not a criticism of Texas's defense at all, because the Longhorn defense is great. But every team that's had that happen to them has been cooked by this football team. So I would recommend getting some pressure on number 9 from the edge, up the gut, all over the place in this game on Monday. Otherwise, it'll be a long day for my friend Pete Kwiatkowski.
Well, and you mentioned Scott Huff. He and Pete Kwiatkowski go back, right?
And Jeff Choate and Steve Sarkisian. All these guys were all together on Sark's staff way back in the day. Pete Kwiatkowski was there, obviously, with Chris Peterson. But, yeah, all these guys have some kind of a connection to Washington's program. And what Scott Huff has done is crazy. I mean, they got 2 NFL tackles, and Troy Fauteuil on the left side and Roger Rosengarten on the right side. They got a freshman in Parker Brailsford who's been starting at center all year long. The one week where they really had problems with picking up pressure was against Arizona State. That's the game where they won with Michel Powell getting the pick 6 off Tyler Bourget. Without that, they may not win the damn game. That game, Parker had to be moved to guard because Julius Bilo was banged up, and they put a pure freshman in at center in Gearin Hatchett that day. So outside of that day against Arizona State, the offensive line's done a phenomenal job protecting him all year long. And Scott Huff, there's a reason why his boys just won the Heisman Trophy for offensive lines.
Is there a defensive line that Washington has faced that reminds you of Texas?
I mean, maybe Oregon, to be honest with you. Oregon's got some war daddies on their front 7. There's no question about that. But this, not like the 2 guys in the middle. I mean, I know Murphy was more of a backup, I think, last year in the Alamo Bowl team. Is that correct? He was on the 2 deeps, I think, and then Sweat was a starter. But I went back and watched the game, and look, guys, I just got to think if there's anything that you can do to take away defensive tackles, it's run right at them. It's screen them to death. And I think UW in the Alamo Bowl, those guys just combined for 4 tackles. They really weren't a major factor in the Alamo Bowl a year ago. I'm assuming that the next thing you'll say is that those guys are different now than they were a year ago, and I totally buy that, especially with Murphy. But when they face big-time defensive ends, for example, with Utah, Oregon, Oregon State, they've done a great job of just scheming those guys completely out of the picture. So the one thing I'm waiting for, and I think it's the same thing, Chip, I told you a year ago before the Alamo Bowl, I'm waiting for a defensive secondary to get really physical with Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan. Nobody has done that. Everybody is afraid of getting beaten over the top. Nobody's punched these guys in the face yet this year, and I wonder if the Longhorns try and do that.
Yeah, they better. They're terrible at playing off coverage.
Yeah. Softy, obviously, we know this very good passing game for Washington is going to be the focal point for them. But I've been talking about it ever since we've been covering this game. Dylan Johnson's a problem. I think he deserves a lot more credit than he gets. And in that Oregon game, if it wasn't for him, then y'all might not be at this point. Like Dylan Johnson, 1,000-yard rusher, just that balance of complementary football for Kalen DeBoer's offense, that's been huge for Washington's success.
So I'm standing there on the field after the Pac-12 championship against the Ducks in Vegas, and I'm literally 5 feet away from the podium where Michael Penix is being given the MVP trophy for that game. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. I don't blame him for not doing it because he's 23 years old, right? But I'm waiting and waiting and waiting for Michael Penix to take the MVP trophy of that game and give it to Dylan Johnson because he was the MVP. And you're exactly right. I don't know how much of that game you guys have watched, Go back and watch the last drive of the game for Washington. Oregon gets that quick 2-play touchdown to make it 34-31. UW's got the ball, and they need to run the clock. And they get to first down, and Nate Caleppo gets called for a holding penalty, and it's 1st and 20, and you're like, oh, shit, man. Are you kidding me? It's 1st and 20. They're going to have to throw the ball. The clock may stop. Oregon may get the ball back. Guess what happened? They gave the ball to Dylan Johnson 3 times. He got all of it himself against a top 10 run defense in college football. So, dude, I am so freaking proud of that guy. I know we're not supposed to say things like that in the media, right? Like get close to kids, but the way that he has run the ball this year on a bum wheel almost the entire year, he is an absolute war daddy. Cutbacks, right? He catches the ball. He's got great ability to freaking avoid tackles at the line of scrimmage and find a little sliver of room to pick up 3 or 4 yards. And it's not just the long runs, guys. The runs that should be 2 and 3 yard losses for him turn into 1 and 2 yard gains, which may not look like a lot on box score, but instead of 2nd and 12, it's 2nd and 8, or instead of 3rd and 12, it's 3rd and 7. And all of a sudden, the offense is in a totally different situation. So, Zay, you're right, dude. Number 7 has been freaking amazing down the stretch for these guys. And he's done it in the last month against Oregon State, Utah, Oregon. 3 really good run defenses, and he's averaging almost 5 yards a carry in the last month of football. So it really hasn't mattered who they've played. He's burned them no matter what.
Who is getting healthy for Washington?
Well, Dylan's one of them. I mean, if you go back and watch the Pac-12 championship, he was in pain. He was in big-time pain on the sideline during that fourth quarter stretch run. He's going to get healthy. Asa Turner, safety number 20, who you guys saw in the Alamo Bowl a year ago, he's been playing with a club on his hand in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks. That may be off by the time they play in the Alamo Bowl. Tuli Lasanois, the big defensive tackle, they've been really kind of managing his reps a lot in the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks. He has not been a real full-time guy. I think he will be by the time you guys see the Huskies on Monday. And then really the healthiest, the biggest impact is number 11, is McMillan. He missed a lot of time. He got hurt right before halftime against the Michigan State game and really had not been the same up until the Pac-12 championship game in Vegas when he went nuts and put up some gigantic numbers against the Oregon defense. So getting number 11 back, and I saw him about 3 or 4 days ago after practice, no brace, no wrap, no nothing on those knees. He looked totally fine, ready to rock. I think this football team, Chip, is as healthy as they've been all year long.
I've heard about the Arizona State game that Penix had the flu and was miserable.
Yeah.
In the Washington State game, that was the game where they went for it on 4th and 1 from their own 29.
Correct. Yes.
Take us through that game. What was Washington State doing to be so effective and in that game until the final drive?
Yeah, well, they were just closing down run lanes in that game. I mean, they got 2 defensive ends in Brandon Jackson and Ron Stone that I thought did a great job in that game. And look, I know it sounds corny, but that was Wazoo's Super Bowl. I mean, they had to win that game to make their season. You guys, I'm sure, have played games like that against other teams, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, right, whatever, where you feel like, hey, the opposing team may be 5 and 6 or 4 and 7, but if they win this, oh man, they're going to walk away with a really great feeling. And for Washington State to beat UW and keep them out of the Final Four and smash their national title hopes, they played, I thought, that day, guys, with a lot of guts. Cam Ward, who I think is going to end up at Miami, by the way. I'm not sure if that's been officially announced, but I think Cam Ward's going to go to Miami. This guy can play. I mean, he's an athlete. All he needs is coaching, for God's sake. So they played their ass off that day. But the 4th and 1 call, Chip, that you're talking about, I was doing sidelines that day for the radio network, and I was on the field talking to Tony and Cam, our radio guys, telling them, look, if they punt the ball away here, they're going to lose this game. They're not going to win the game by punting the ball. The only chance they have is to convert on 4th and 1 and keep the ball and go down the field. And they did it with a big reverse call to Rome Odunze for 25, 30 yards, put themselves in position to get the game-winning field goal kick from Grady Gross. And that's the kind of game, guys, that these guys have played for the last 2 months. Every single game. I mean, guys, I got them right here. The Arizona game, the Oregon game, the Arizona State, Stanford. It took a drop by a fullback, a tight end from Stanford to win that game. USC, they had to pull away in the 4th quarter. Utah, the Utes had the ball with a chance to win the game in the 4th quarter. Oregon State, the Huskies did not score a point in the 4th quarter and still found a way to win that game. The Wazoo game, the last game with the Ducks. This is 8-9 games in a row where they're in a battle every single freaking game. Most teams have 1 or 2 games like this the entire year. Washington's been playing a game like this for 2.5 months. Ever since October, they are absolutely battle-tested. Look, I know that Texas has too. I know that Texas has played games like that as well. And that, to me, is one of the great sidebar angles of this story. If it's a 24-24 game with 8 minutes left to go, who's got the guts to find a way to pull away and get this thing done on New Year's Day? And I can't wait.
There we go. I love it. I love it. Softy, when you think about Texas as a whole, what are UW fans most afraid of when they look at this Texas roster?
Well, I think you got to start with Sweat and Murphy on defense, obviously. But then again, I do think that you can scheme those guys out of the game plan if you're Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff. So curious to see what they do in that regard. I mean, Xavier Worthy, right? Huskies won a 27-20 game a year ago. If I'm not mistaken, Worthy had a busted hand in that game or a sprained hand or whatever. I think he had 2 drops on like the same drive last year in the Alamo Bowl for Texas. So if I'm him, I'm pissed off. I'm juiced up. I'm bitter. I am angry. I am ready to tear these guys' heads off on New Year's Day if I'm Xavier Worthy. Everybody's talking about Rumadunze. Everybody's talking about McMillan and Polk and those great Husky wide receivers. And if I were Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell, I would say, no, man, the hell with that. We're going to show these guys that we are the dudes that people should be talking about. So that's a concern for me because I know how I would want my guys to think if the roles were reversed. The secondary for UW at times has been a little bit suspect. There's no doubt that getting Asa Turner back, getting Cameron Fabiculana, number 13, back again. The back end with Dom Hampton as well has been kind of solidified from a communication perspective. But I think, Chip, last year you and I talked, and I said the exact same thing to you that I'll say now. And I know that Sark knows this because he's not stupid. And I know that William Inge and Chuck Morrell, the defensive coordinators for UW, know this because they're not stupid. But if I'm Steve Sarkisian and I'm Quinn Ewers, I am taking the ball at the line of scrimmage. I'm looking to my left, I'm looking to my right, and I'm asking myself, where's 25? Where's 25? Where is Elijah Jackson? And wherever Elijah Jackson is, that's where I'm going. I'm going right to 25 until Washington proves they can stop it. He has been the absolute weak link in this Husky defense all year long. He's playing better. There's no question he's playing better, but he still is the weak link. There is a massive difference, guys, between number 1 on one side, Jabbar Muhammad, and number 25 on the other. So I know what I would do. We'll see if they're, smart enough to pull that off or if they're stubborn enough to not do it. I know a lot of coaches have they're set in their ways. They do their thing. They're scripted plays and blah, blah, blah. No, dude, you're trying to play in the damn natty. Whatever it takes for both teams. And that's what I'm doing if I'm Steve Sarkisian. So we'll see.
Yeah. If Washington's going to win this game, what absolutely has to happen?
Red zone offense has to be a major advantage for Washington. I noticed that when I was doing some stats study, if you will, for this game, which basically just means going to NCAA.com and looking at stats, by the way. But the red zone offense for Texas is not the red zone offense for Washington. Washington scores a touchdown 70% of the time in the red zone. Texas is at 49, right? And if it's one extra score, right, if it's 4 extra points versus a field goal for Texas and a touchdown for UW, the red zone advantage for Washington has to matter. Number 2, and this scares, can I say shit, by the way? This scares the absolute shit out of me because it's been a problem all year long. Washington is 125th in the country in penalties. And when I say penalties, I mean 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, Zion Tupuola-Fatui, number 4, or Braylon Trice, number 8, and they're both great players, but sometimes they get a little excited, and they like to leave early, and they'll jump off sides, and teams will continue drives because number 8 and number 4 can't calm down. That is my absolute worst nightmare in this game. You guys have the ball, you're down 1, it's a tie game, it's 3rd and 3 from your own 30, whatever, and Braylon Trice jumps off sides or Zion jumps off sides and gives you guys a free set of downs. Mark my words. It will happen at least one time in this game on Monday, and you'll say, Softy said it, and there it is. I just hope it happens in the first quarter, not the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I did notice that. I mean, their defense, 17 pass interference penalties.
Oh yeah.
Jabbar Muhammad he's a good, tough physical corner, but he leads the team in defensive pass interference.
Yeah, most of that is because of how much activity they get, by the way. I mean, he does get a lot of PIs. He also makes a lot of plays on the ball. But again, if I'm being honest with you, which I am, the secondary is absolutely the weak link on this football team. So getting Quinn Ewers off the spot, the Longhorns are 63rd in the country, I think, in sacks allowed. That's a much different animal versus UW. UW is very good at protecting Michael Penix. I just be curious for you guys, though, how much of that number is because Ewers likes to run around and maybe run himself into sacks versus the offensive line collapsing?
Well, they had some issues. Their center went down in the OU game, and that was a problem. So I think we learned Jake Majors is the starting center is pretty darn valuable. He played on a high ankle sprain for a few weeks. He's healthy now, but yeah, I mean they had some busts, and honestly, Jonathan Brooks, their running back, was their best blitz pickup guy.
Right.
And it's not been as good since he went down with the torn ACL.
Yeah. And that's one thing, by the way, that Dylan Johnson is phenomenal at. I know I keep referencing the Oregon game guys in Vegas, but the blitz pickup by Dylan Johnson, sensational. I mean, there is a major drop-off from him and the rest of those running backs. So God forbid, if he gets hurt, if that ankle becomes an issue for whatever reason in this game on Monday, the drop from him to guys like Will Nixon and Sam Adams and Richard Newton is precipitous. It is gigantic. And remember, he was supposed to be a backup. Cam Davis, the starting running back from a year ago, got hurt over the offseason, and we thought, oh, man, we're screwed, dude. This running game is going to be a major problem. So seeing Dylan Johnson go over 1,000 yards, huge surprise for this team. Huge.
Yeah. And Texas's tight end, JT Sanders, unbelievable receiving threat.
Yep.
Not a great blocker.
Got it right here. 5 for $114 in the Bama game, 8 for $105 touchdown, Big 12 championship. That's another issue that I got to keep an eye on, too, if I'm Washington. Tight ends down the seam at points in time have been an issue for this football team. How much do they use that Sanders kid down the seam, guys?
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah,
right.
Perfect.
They will go at Elijah Jackson, whoever he's lined up on. They'll go after him until Washington adjusts.
Right.
Then they'll go to to Sanders down the seam. That's what they did with Alabama.
You guys like me you have no idea how this game is going to go on Monday. Zero idea.
I mean, you go anyway, Softy. Anyway.
I do think it's going to be a field goal type game unless Texas can get pressure, unless you get a legacy game from Sweat and Murphy and they just take over the game.
Well, and again, nobody has really done that, right? Like you're talking about doing something that nobody has really been able to do, not just this year, but going back to last year as well. We're talking, 26 games, whatever it is. Nobody has really been able to get any pressure on Michael Penix, and maybe it does happen this week. Maybe this is the week where all of a sudden Washington's offense is exposed against a really good defensive line. But I'm with you on the kickers, man. We're actually debating where to do our pregame show, either in the stadium, in a booth, or at the UW alumni party at the Pelicans Arena. And there's a big part of me that just wants to get my ass into the stadium because I want to see what Grady Gross is doing pregame field goal wise. I want to see what Bert Auburn's doing pregame field goal wise and see what their range looks like indoors. I mean, it's phenomenal weather for kickers, right? Like there's no challenges at all for the kicker. Just have the operation, the snap, the hold, the kick, the blah, the blue. Bert Auburn, long of 54 right this year. Grady Gross, long of 47. Grady Gross has not had one kick over 50 plus the entire year. Not one, okay? He hasn't even attempted one kick over 50 plus, while Auburn's done it 4 times and made 2 of them. So that is absolutely a little bit of a sidebar, and maybe even a gigantic sidebar to keep an eye on this week. If Grady Gross is nailing from 50 plus in the pregame consistently, does Kalen DeBoer and Eric Schmidt, who's a special teams coach, do they have the balls to let this guy attempt his first 50-yarder of the season? And it would be, by the way, of his career, because this is his first year, Do they have the guts to let Grady Gross let one fly from 50 plus for the first time ever in this game on Monday?
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting time to try it.
Woo! I'm getting a heart attack just thinking about it, boys. My God, I got to bring the paddles out thinking about this. Holy hell! What's the Texas fan representation going to look like on Monday night? You think?
Oh, it's going to be a mob
Pretty
scene.
thick.
Yeah, they're all over this game. I mean, it's an easy. I mean, not easy, but it's a doable drive
For sure. Yeah.
7 hours from Austin, and so there's already a bunch of burnt orange in New Orleans.
Well, and look, there was in San Antonio last year too. I get it. I mean, I'm expecting 70-30 Texas, 60-40, whatever. It's a long ways away from Seattle. Flights are expensive, guys. It was like $2,000 to get out there from Seattle, right? Airlines are milking people like cows. I mean, it was ridiculous, dude. So I don't think you'll see a gigantic Husky representation. It'll be bigger than the Peach Bowl in Atlanta 7 years ago, but not as nearly as big as Texas. I do honestly wonder how much that stuff really matters once the game starts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it really a factor once the game gets going, second quarter, third quarter? Is it really a giant factor? I don't feel like it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just love the matchup. Penix is such an alpha. I love the matchup of Penix and this passing game and the guys up front for Texas, because they are every bit the alpha that Penix is. It's just a matter of, who can impose their will.
How do you handicap the Texas secondary against the Husky offense?
I mean, they better have gotten a lot better in their 15 bowl practices because, and I'll say this, a lot of the Texas pass defense issues occurred after getting up 20 against Houston, K-State, and TCU. They had 20-point leads in each of those games, and then started to try to keep everything in front of them.
Yeah.
They're just not built that way. They have to be up on the receivers. Their corners, Malik Muhammad, Ryan Watts, those guys want to be up on the receivers, and the coaches need to let them play that way and take their chances, because they're not good when they're playing off coverage and trying to keep stuff in front of them.
And Softy, a ton of teams throw on them. They're like 123rd in pass attempts against. So a lot of teams are afraid of that line. They just throw a ton. And Texas passing defense, they've been solid at times, but they're 86th in the nation when it comes to explosive plays given up. So that's what really scares me. We know what Polk and McMillan and Adunze could do if they get the ball in their hands. So if the Horns limit those, then their chances should be good. But if those explosive plays from Washington happen, Texas could be in some serious trouble.
Well, and like I said, you're going to see as healthy a wide receiver core as you've seen all year long for Washington. I mean, there's going to be points in time in this game where you see five wides out there with Adunze, McMillan, Polk, Giles Jackson, and Jeremy Bernard, number 4. Maybe even Denzel Boston gets involved. They're 6 deep at wide receiver. Obviously, they're not going to play 6 guys at one time, but there will be times where you will see 5 wideouts out there for Washington, and 3 of them are likely NFL dudes, and maybe even 4 of them are NFL dudes. So this will be the best wide receiving core that you've seen all year long by far. I think it'll be the best defensive line that you'd ever seen all year long. It's just the intangibles, man, the penalties, the turnovers, all the stupid cliche-ish crap that we always talk about before games like this that we always kind of want to avoid because you want to say something, a little more intelligent than that. But that's what always matters. When it's all said and done, that always, always matters. So I'm a little surprised at Texas being a 4-point favorite, to be honest with you, in this game. I thought it'd be a lot closer in Vegas's eyes. Every game Washington's played this year where they've been a dog, they've not just covered but won. The Oregon line was stupid from the start at 9.5, was ridiculous. No idea what Vegas was looking at for that thing. But, dude, I can't wait. I mean, this is like 4 weeks of hell waiting until this game. And then you win, you play for the Natty, and you get 7 days off. It makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
By the way, are you in a hotel room right now, Chip?
Oh, yeah.
Are you in New Orleans?
Yes.
Is your girlfriend, your wife, you got a buddy staying with you? What's with the 2 beds back there?
Well, she's out doing her thing. But yeah, we just took what we could get. You know what I'm
Gotcha.
saying?
Well, I got to say, because I need a room, so if you don't mind me shacking up with you, I see you got an extra bed over there.
Yeah, I'll let you ask her. So
sure.
last thing, Softy, the punting game. Washington blocked a punt in the Alamo Bowl last year. How is Washington's punter, and how's their special teams?
Yeah, special teams really hasn't done a lot this year, to be honest with you, which is fine by me. Special teams, in my opinion, guys, are kind of like referees in basketball. The less you hear about them, the better they're doing, right? So there hasn't been a lot of mistakes on special teams for UW this year. McAllister's been fine. You know, whether it's Roma Dunze, McMillan, or Giles Jackson back there returning punts, they've been fine. Nobody really does anything in the kick return game anymore, it seems like, not just in football, but in the NFL as well. Everybody's fair catching crap, taking the ball at the 25-yard line. So Washington's special teams have kind of been like referees in basketball. They just haven't really made a lot of noise either way, and I'm kind of fine with that, to be honest with you. What about you guys?
I mean, Xavier Worthy's the best punt returner in the nation.
Yeah.
So if he could make his mark on the game, obviously that's a plus for the Horns. But yeah, they've had their ups and downs too.
I would be surprised if they give him chances, though, guys. I mean, one thing that they've done with the punt game is they've kicked the ball away from people, right? You know, going to the sideline, squib kicking the ball down the field, rugby-style stuff. They have an ability to do both the pro-style punting and the rugby-style punting, and they've been really good at that this year. So I'd be surprised, especially in a close game, if they really give Worthy a lot of chances to touch the football on special teams. Because let's face it, it's just stupid. I mean, it's dumb. Why would you allow that guy to have more touches when you can limit the touches that he's got? Why would you not do that? So I think they'll do that on Monday.
All right, we got a question here. It says, ask Softy about red shirt defensive end.
Yeah, Zach Durfee. Is that the guy you're talking about?
Oh, so yeah.
Tell us
about him.
He's a transfer who has not played all year long. He's from South Dakota with Kalen DeBoer. And the NCAA ruled him ineligible because he transferred during COVID but never played a game. And so he wanted to transfer a third time to Washington. And the NCAA said, you can't do that. You got to sit out, even though he never played a damn snap for the team he went to because of COVID. So he's playing in his first game ever as a Husky on Monday night. His name is Zach Durfee. And honestly, I don't have any idea what to expect out of the guy because I've never seen the guy play. All I've seen is film, and those are all highlights, right? Nobody's putting lowlights on YouTube, for God's sake. So the coaches and the players talk this guy up like he's Max Crosby or J.J. Watt. Okay? Honestly. So I think it's a little bit crazy, a little bit out of control with kind of the myth and the legend that's already grown for Zach Durfee. If you go follow the players' Twitter accounts, which, God, I hope you guys don't do that. But all year long, they've been saying, free Durfee, and the NCAA finally freed him. So they don't have a lot of depth at defensive end behind number 4 and number 8. So I'm curious to see how much run this guy gets on Monday. But I got to be honest with you, Chip and Zay, I think when it's all said and done, this guy's probably a non-factor on Monday night.
Softy, last one for me. It's been 10 years since Steve Sarkisian was let go at UW. Right. Talk about the relationship that you had with him, what you remember during this tenure there, and the growth that you've seen him have to now having a 10-win season and being in the college football playoff with Texas.
I had a great relationship with him. I mean, there's been 3 coaches that I've worked with that have been really media friendly and great to work with, and it's Rick Neuheisel, Steve Sarkisian, and Kalen DeBoer. All 3 of those guys are great with the press. I mean, not that really matters when it's all said and done because Don James was a pain in the ass with the media and he was the best coach Washington's ever had, right? So Nick Saban, of course, nobody's going to say Nick Saban's media friendly, but he's obviously the best coach ever in the history of college football. So I got fond memories of Sark. Some fans don't. I do, I mean, you guys got to remember when we first met Steve in 2009, he was 35 years old. I mean, he was a kid. Right. And now he's going to be 50, I think, in March of next year. And he's totally turned his life around, lost his family, lost his job, lost his reputation, had to go back to the bottom and start over again. He got married. He married Malik Smith's sister, as you guys know, the former Mariner outfielder, who's a beautiful woman, by the way. Good for him. But I'm proud of the guy. Right. I know it's a corny thing to say, but I'm really proud of the guy for what he was able to do. It's hard to imagine that Steve Sarkisian is coaching Texas in the Final Four, and he was once fired as the head coach at USC for being an alcoholic. I mean, just think about that. What he's been through and where he is now and the way he's turned his life around. So, you know, for me, he took over an 0-12 team in 2008, and 2 years later had him beating Nebraska in the Holiday Bowl to go 7-6. 7-6, not a phenomenal season, but when you're 0-12 2 years earlier, man, to win 7 more games over a 2-year period, that's a hell of a turnaround. So I'm happy for him. I just hope the Huskies kick his ass on Monday.
Well, Softy, safe travels, man. I will see you when you get here.
I'll be there tomorrow night. I'll shoot you a text, man.
All right, buddy.
All right, go Dogs. See ya.